Well, hello again, everybody. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by 101 CBD, the makers of premium raw CBD oil products like their Alleviate tincture, which always helps me deal with pain and inflammation and those mystery tight muscles and joints that I sometimes get. And right now, they want you to know about their Raw Relief CBD hand sanitizer that you can pick up and take with you anywhere. Fits in your pocket or even your purse. Now, I like it because when I have to break quarantine either to go to the store or to go to work, it really does give me peace of mind to know that I have an extra layer of antimicrobial and antiviral protection when I use the hand sanitizer. As a matter of fact, I was over there yesterday, picked up some more Alleviate tincture, some more bacon-flavored tincture for my dog Dante, and some more hand sanitizer for me and my family. So go over to 101cbd.org and pick yourself up some CBD oil and some hand sanitizer, and don't forget to use coupon code IMGS25 at checkout to get 25% off of that order. Okay, now let's start the show. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. As always, I'm your host, Alex. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen to me. I truly do appreciate it. I hope everyone is doing as well as you can be, quarantined in your house or wherever you're quarantined at. Hopefully, you're lucky enough to actually be at home and you're not one of these people who are trapped in a different country somewhere who were traveling when coronavirus shut the world down. Well, shut travel down anyways. A little later, I'm going to talk about soil amendments. More specifically, I'm going to talk about manure as soil amendments. But before that, I was thinking, since it is April now, when 2020 started, I was kicking back, January 1, thinking, yeah, man, April is going to be, it's 420 all month long in April. It's going to be so much fun. So many things are going to be happening. And it was really looking like that was going to be the case, as far as like the end of February, everybody was still planning for their big 420 events. And all of those 420 events have been canceled. So now I'm wondering, what is 420 going to look like when no one's allowed to go outside or even get together and congregate and, you can't get together in crowds bigger than 10. So yeah, where have all the 420 celebrations gone? What are people going to do? I've heard of virtual 420 sessions, everybody logs in at the same time and, I don't know, has video of everybody smoking joints. How does that work exactly? How is that going to work? I don't know what I'm going to do for 420 now. Maybe do like a man on the street type of thing? Perhaps. Hey, that'd be kind of a good idea, right? What are you doing for 420? Yeah, so it's going to be a little interesting to see how that all goes down on Monday. That sucks too, though, that 420 is on Monday. Whatever. Everybody's off anyways, right? And I know I'm signed up for a couple of like 420 sessions at different places, different times. So for 420, what I'm trying to look for are actually, like cool things or upbeat things to do. Because the main conversation right now about 420 is just that. Everybody's all bummed out that everything was canceled. How do we turn it around? How do we make it exciting? I don't know. Help me out. Let's figure it out. Do we have a big chat? Everyone's going to open up chat rooms anyways. Now I just feel like I'm babbling, which I think I am. Anyways, all right, let's move forward then. So now the other thing I was remembering is if you were a teenager in the late 80s, you've got to remember what Columbia House Record Club was, right? Remember they used to have these big ads in like music magazines like Spin Magazine and Rolling Stone. You would get 12 tapes for a penny. Oh, it was a lot of fun, man. If you were a teenager in the late 80s, you know what I'm talking about. You would get the ad out of the magazine. You would select 12 tapes or CDs or even, if you're old enough, even like vinyl records. And I always wondered as a teenager how they made money because I know I allegedly scammed them a couple of times. You would get the ad out of Rolling Stone and check off in the catalog the 12 tapes that you wanted them to send you, and then you'd send them a penny also. Put a totally fake name on the order form, and never pay them. But, that was just one of those things you did as a teenager in the 80s. But anyways, man, yeah, Columbia Record Club, man. Who didn't think that was a great idea when you were a teenager in the 80s? Come on, man. That was a good time. We were stealing music before Napster. Allegedly. We were allegedly stealing music before Napster. How about that? And now that I'm on that, I just want to remind everybody that this show, this program, this podcast is completely for entertainment value. Okay, that's all this is. This is all a made-up world of entertainment. Anyways, all right. Now, with that said, with the since we've gone down memory lane and talked about 12 tapes for a penny, let's move on to the strain of the week. Now, today I want to give it up to the Irene OG, a.k.a. the Irene Kush, which is a sativa dominant hybrid. The internet says it is a 40-60 sativa dominant strain. And let me tell you, it is a powerful phenotype of what I like to call an heirloom strain, which is the OG Kush. Now, gotta be honest with you, I really liked this flower. It had this really sweet, peppery, almost like nutmeg taste to it. A little kind of musky, but really sweet, and then had this like fuely, gassy flavor at the end. It was a great taste, man, and a great smell. I really liked it. And this flower came in at a 22% THC level, and even though it was 22%, holy cow, is this thing a heavy hitter. Oh my God. It was, I felt it right away. The first hit, boom, hit me like nothing else. This is a good one and done type of flower. Pack yourself a small bowl, take one hit, and then walk away, especially if you need to go do something. If you're in the middle of something, do not finish that bowl. Do not smoke a whole joint or even a half a joint. You will be too high, or at least I was way too high. Seriously, that's not a joke. If you feel like you need to be crisp, you need to be able to keep it together and go do something, do not smoke this Irene OG. If you need to go to your aunt's house, to your tia's house, and pick up a list to go get her groceries, this is not the weed you want to be on when you go see your aunt. Okay? She's going to tell you're high, bro. Not only that, when you go get her groceries, you're going to come back with a whole bunch of cookies that she didn't want. Anyways, so, it's just to let you know, okay? It's a heavy hitter. It's a lot of fun. It's great to celebrate with. I was really impressed with it. I really liked it. And one of the really cool things was that, when I was coming down, it didn't like put me into the couch. It didn't zap my energy or my motivation, If anything, I got really high, turned on some music. I heard my jam, I got real dancy with it, real jazzy, I was feeling so good, thought my dance moves are so good, I was almost biting my bottom lip, like, yeah, look at me. But, yeah, that was just me way too high, and with my jams way too loud, I guess. Now, the internet says that it is good for mild to moderate cases of depression, chronic stress, insomnia, chronic fatigue, and chronic pain. I can see why. Once again, that is the Irene OG or the Irene Kush. If you find it, go get it. Have a good time during the quarantine. All right, now coming out of my social media, I just want to let you guys know about something. That is the CDFA, which is the California Department of Food and Agriculture. They have a proactive IPM solution program and are now accepting applications for their Biological Integrated Farming Systems Grant Program, or BIFs for short. The goal of the proactive IPM solution grant program is to anticipate which exotic pests are likely to arrive in California and to identify and test IPM strategies that can be rapidly implemented if the pests become established in California. So if you are an insectary or, a biologist or, a person who, works with insects or some kind of IPM for farming, and you think you have a strategy to really, recognize pests really quickly, exotic pests, you think you've got something going on, it's time for you to send that into the California Department of Food and Agriculture because they are handing out money to see if your system works. Now, deadline has been extended from May 31st to June 30th, 2020 in response to the disturbance caused by the COVID-19 outbreak. And there is a link in the show notes so you can send in your application, your proposal, whatever kind of plan you have for IPM. Get it done, man. You're a pretty smart person. Come on, your plan works. Let's see it. Prove it. Okay, now let's do the report from the cannabis front line. So I have a question, and I don't know if I've asked you this before or not, but whatever, I'll ask it again. So now since all sporting events, all, concerts have been canceled, the NBA canceled its season, Major League Baseball canceled their season, let me ask you this. And I know they already had this before the epidemic, before everybody got quarantined, but I mean, what would you pay for like VR seats, virtual reality seats to an event? A basketball game, there's, two teams are playing whatever, two basketball teams are playing. There's nobody in the stadium. It's just a bunch of VR cameras and everybody bought their VR seat. I mean, would you pay as much for that VR seat as you did for, regular NBA tickets? I don't think I'd pay the same amount, because you're not really there. You're not, in my opinion anyways, you're not there like hanging out with the crowd of people and feeling the excitement of the fans, the energy. I mean, yeah, you can see it, I guess, through VR. This I can just imagine. I've never done it or seen an event like that. But that's what I imagine it's like, And I bring it up because we're going to have to do something. Like even for concerts or plays and musicals, all of those artists, they need a way to keep making money and feeding themselves and making a living through their art. But with the crackdown on crowds, how do they do that? I think, VR events would really answer that, even like live comedy shows. And I think it could work. I think the seats should be cheaper. Because I also think you have the ability to have more people watch you. I don't think you're held back by how many seats the venue holds anymore now. And the reason I bring that up is because, like on St. Patrick's Day, the Dropkick Murphys did their usual St. Patrick's Day concert that I think they usually have it in Boston. But they had it online on Facebook, and something like 134,000 people at one point were watching. Which I thought was really impressive because it'd be really hard to get 134,000 people in one actual physical venue. So that's what I mean. I wonder, would the tickets be less expensive? But with a lot more people showing up, the artists and the athletes would still make their money. The team owners of sporting events would still make their money. Yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, would you show up for something like that? I think I would, if I had the VR goggles and the prices were reasonable. Sure, why not, man? I'd try it. Once again, though, I don't think it'd be the same. It's not the same feeling as a live event, but yeah, at least you're kind of there. So staying on the topic of sports, before coronavirus, or you know what, I'm going to start to call it BC. So before the coronavirus, the NFL came out and said that it wasn't going to discipline or fine any of the players that wound up like coming up dirty, peeing dirty for cannabis on a drug test. Which I got to tell you, I think that is an awesome move. I could never understand why the NFL would not let their players use cannabis, because cannabis has been known for a long time to be a neuroprotectant. And if you're playing football on any level, you are taking some kind of brain damage, in my opinion. From everything I've read and understood, yeah, your brain's getting rattled around in your head. So again, I never understood why the NFL wouldn't just allow their players to use cannabis. So big round of applause for the NFL, I got to be honest with you. I stopped actually following the NFL because of the way they would treat cannabis in their drug policy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still, showed up and watched the big game, the Super Bowl, but I just stopped following teams, But now that the NFL's actually changed their attitude about cannabis, I'm going to start watching more of the NFL now. I mean, hopefully that's if their season actually starts. When does their season start? I think it's like the first week in September, I believe. Hopefully the quarantine's over by then and the NFL actually gets played. But once again, maybe they just start having VR games, Who knows? Hopefully it happens. And speaking of just seasons being canceled, you know how the NBA canceled their season, 3 weeks ago, And this has nothing to do with cannabis. I just thought I'd bring it up because it's kind of funny, man. I read an article, a couple of days ago. And I read it over at the Knicks blog. And the title says, NBA, ESPN in talks to televise NBA horse competition. So apparently the NBA and ESPN have gotten together and decided to, at some point in the near future, they're going to televise a game of horse. The playground basketball game horse where you make a shot and then the next person tries to make the same shot. Yeah, so they're actually going to televise a version of that, but with NBA players. I don't know how that's gonna work. I mean, it sounds fun at first, but what's the end here, really? Okay, I get it. They don't want people to forget about the NBA, but are we gonna start the National Horse League? I think that's gonna put a whole new definition on what a pro athlete's gonna look like. A pro horse athlete, not a basketball athlete. I don't know. Don't misunderstand me. I'm still gonna watch. I still want to see what that's gonna look like. But it's it's just another kind of new thing that we're living with now. Yeah, it's gonna be a trip, man. I can't wait to go to the sports bar to see the horse competition. Literally the basketball playground game of horse. Well, I don't know. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is this study that came out of the Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center. And it's titled Legal Marijuana Products Too Strong for Pain Relief. It says more than 90% of legal marijuana products offered in medical dispensaries are much stronger than the clinical studies have shown that doctors recommend for chronic pain relief. Now, Edgar Romero Sandoval, which is an associate professor of anesthesiology at Wake Forest School of Medicine, said the goal of the study was to evaluate the advertised THC and CBD content of legal cannabis products to determine their suitability for medical use, and to compare the potency of the products offered in medical and recreational programs. The researchers recorded the concentration of THC and CBD in all plant cannabis products provided by legal dispensary websites and compared them between or within the states in the study. The team found that most products offered in medical dispensaries in the study had more than 10% THC, and that many had 15% or more. They said this is a problem because between 60 and 80% of people who use medical marijuana use it for pain relief. The higher the concentration of THC, the greater the risk not only of developing dependency, but also in developing tolerance more quickly, which means higher and higher concentrations might be needed to get the same level of pain relief. Better regulation of potency of medical marijuana products is critical. The FDA regulates the level of over-the-counter pain medications such as ibuprofen that have dose-specific side effects. So why don't we have policy and regulations for cannabis, something that is far more dangerous? Okay, well, you know what? Yeah, I do see the point, of where pain management people who are really using cannabis as medicine, not just to celebrate and to party with, I can see why you would want to, have the lowest dosage possible for an effect. And that's where you want to start. You know what I mean? If it's 5%, okay, let's start at 5 and then just what's called titrate up or ratchet up the amount that you may need for your pain. But I don't believe it when he says that cannabis is more dangerous than ibuprofen. That I don't buy. And the study does bring up something that we should talk about, and that is, an actual THC limit for medical products. Because they are making the point, it is medicine. You don't want to give somebody way too much of anything and then have them start off at a higher dosage, and then, like the article's saying, then they get used to it, then they need more. And then you have to start wondering, okay, well, if we up the dosage, is that going to lead people? Are we going to have more people that have, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, or just, vomiting because of too much cannabis? There's a lot of things to take into account, And then it makes me think about that thing that Patrick Goggin was talking about last time about the, what did he call that? A safe harbor limit? I think that's what he called it, a safe harbor limit, which is basically that, just the basic or the lowest dose that is safe for most people. I think I might have screwed that up the way he explained it. But anyways, I see the point of this article. And we need to talk about it. It needs to be said, and we need to hear it from everybody. And I'm talking about the medical side, not the recreational side. I don't think there should be limits on recreational THC. Because people are there to use it to celebrate, to get high, to do whatever they're going to do. So that's my opinion on it. There you go. And that, brothers and sisters, is the report from the Cannabis Frontline. Now, as always, there are links in the show notes to all of these articles so you can read them yourself and form your own opinion. And after you do that, let me know what you think. Now, since it is springtime, and it is time to crack them seeds and get them into the ground, I want to talk a little bit about using manure as a soil amendment. Now, before I really get into any of the notes about any of the different manures, I want to say something just very basic, very broad about using manures. And when I say manures, I mean like waste that comes from animals, not green manures. What I'm talking about is like, horse manure, goat manure, cow manure, just, different chickens and, seabirds. So that kind of manure. So why I like using manure as a soil amendment is because it does help build the soil structure, and it also is able to feed for a long period of time at a consistent level. I'll go over that in a little bit. One of the really important things that I learned about using manures, and mostly like manures from livestock that eat grass, is that it's really good at retaining water, at hanging on to water. Especially like cow manure, it's going to hang on to water for a long time. And those are one of the positives of using manure. Downside to that is that it's going to hang on to water for a really long time. It's going to stay wet for a long time. It doesn't drain very well. And since it doesn't drain very well, that means that it's also not allowing air to circulate. Okay, so you need to be really aware of that. And then when it does eventually dry up, it compacts and it hardens up, which just causes the same kind of problem of not letting air circulate through the root zone. And all three of those things put together aren't good for a healthy root system. That's why I use manure as a soil amendment and not as like my straight growing medium. Like I said, those are just some basic thoughts, some basic rules that I use when I'm using manures as a soil amendment. All right, now let's start going through some of them. So the first one I'm going to start with is cow manure or steer manure. That's the one I typically use. That's the one I usually buy at the nursery. And I usually think of that manure as like a mulch because, as I said, it's really going to hang on to a bunch of water. And it's still going to have a lot of organic material. Not a lot, not like big pieces, but, enough to feed the microbes. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about before all of this is that whatever manure you use, and there are some exceptions, but whatever manure you use, make sure it gets composted first. I don't recommend using any manure. And like I said, there are exceptions. Rabbit manure is probably one exception, and maybe worm castings is another exception. But I do not recommend using any manure that hasn't been composted yet. And the reason for that is wet manure or fresh manure, it's when it's breaking down, when it's being composted, it creates a lot of heat. And if you put that fresh manure right on your gardens when your gardens are already going, you do run the chance of that heat actually burning the root zone, burning your plants. You just could cause a whole bunch of other problems. So, just make sure that whatever manure you're going to use gets composted. Because composting is also going to help, along with that heat, it's going to kill any pathogens, or it's going to kill most pathogens in the soil. It's also going to kill a lot of like grass seeds or weed seeds that are in it. So yeah, just make sure your manure is composted. And the NPK for cow manure, for steer manure, isn't that high. This is another reason why you shouldn't use just cow manure as your growing medium. It does not have enough nutrients, enough macronutrients to really have your plant thrive. At best, that cow manure is going to have like 0.5 NPK, all three of them, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. At best, that's what it's going to have. Now, it's going to have an abundance of the micronutrients, but those macronutrients, it's not going to have a lot of them. But here's the thing, here's that prolonged constant feeding, is that it's going to feed for a long time at that same rate. For months and months on end, it is still going to just be feeding your plant that constant 0.5 of those nutrients. So that's what I mean by a prolonged feeding. Now, goat and horse manure, you know what? I treat it the same as just the steer manure, the cow manure. The only differences for me, so the horse and the goat manure, I really do have to pay attention that it is composted, because I don't get that at the nursery. I can get that from a couple of different people I know around here who have goats and horses. And they're more than eager to just get rid of all that shit. Literally. But I have to watch out for it, or at least really pay attention to the composting of it, because I know, especially in the goat manure, since they do eat a lot of just anything, they will have a lot of kind of big chunks of like wood chips in it. And I got to make sure to clear all the wood chips out of that compost. Yeah, I know it's a shitty job. And I do that because I had read somewhere that the big wood chips will pass through the intestines of the animals and still very possibly have like a plant pathogen on it. So I have to be really careful, when I do get fresh manure, that I just take out the big chunks. Yeah, that's why I don't get any fresh horse or goat manure anymore. Is because it's too hands-on. And the NPK factor for those are about the same as the cow manure. It'll fluctuate. It'll be like 0.6 or 0.8. It just depends. But again, they are going to have that prolonged feeding. All right, now let's talk a little bit about some bird manures. Let's start with chicken. I like chicken manure. It's not very easy for me to get. I don't think my local nursery, I have to order a bag of composted chicken manure. But it's great. I like it. I like to use it as a top dressing. It really does do wonders for my garden. But since it is a little hard to get from my garden, I don't use it very much. I do know people who have chickens and they use a lot of that manure on their own gardens. One thing that they have told me is that you do have to use it sparingly because it does get hot when it's decomposing, when it's composting. One thing that they did tell me, though, is that in wintertime, they use it wet, fresh, straight on their gardens because since it does create that heat, suddenly it does kind of help warm up the root zone. Don't know how true that is, but hey, they say they use it, and their rainbow char looks awesome in the wintertime. And that composted chicken manure is going to have a nitrogen phosphorus of about 4, and a potassium of about maybe 2 is an average, 1.5, 2, somewhere around there. Now, I've also heard of people using pigeon manure. I hear it's also really high in nitrogen. I've never used it. It's also, I don't know, it's not very easy to get. I don't know about how hard it is to get. It's just a matter of ordering it. But, it just seems like more of a hassle to get than just chicken manure. But if you see it and never want to try it, hey, get some pigeon manure. See how that works out for you. And it's going to have about the same amount of NPK as the chicken did. So, there you go. Which brings me to the seabird guano, which is just that. It's just poop from seabirds. Now I do want to say this about both seabird guano and bat guano. I do like using them. I do like the results I get from them. They're both very awesome soil amendments. But I don't use them anymore because from how I understand it, when they harvest both the bat guano and the seabird guano, it kind of disturbs and destroys the habitat for them. So I'm not really down for that. And if I can get the same results from other kind of soil amendments, I will, instead of, having to kind of give my money towards that part of the industry. And that's just how I feel about both of those guanos, the seabird and the bat. And that's going to bring me to pig manure or swine manure. I like pig manure. It's really good. But it does have to be composted. And it has to be composted for like a long time, like 3 years, I think. God, who told me? I think it was Rooster or Lorax. Somebody was telling me they had pigs and they were telling me they had to compost it for years because it just gets way too hot. But it's a really good soil amendment. And again, it's going to have roughly about the same NPK as like this cow manure, about 0.6, 0.8 maybe, depending. But again, it is going to have like the full range of the micronutrients that you're going to want. And last but certainly not least, is my favorite, and that is the worm castings. Earthworm castings are great. I can't say enough about them. If you get a nice, rich, fresh worm casting that's going to look like coffee grounds, it's not going to have an odor to it, really. It's just going to have like a fresh rain kind of smell to it, if you can imagine that. Again, I have to mention to you that worm castings are very heavy. They're very dense. If you're going to mix it in with your soil, don't mix in more than 20%. Make sure it's no more than 20% of your soil. And that's because worm castings are also really dense. They will hang on to water a lot. And they also, when they dry, they'll harden up. So you don't want your soil to be too full of this because it will just stop any kind of air from flowing around the root system. And it's going to take a long time for it to really dry out. So yeah, even though it's good for your soil, you don't want to go too heavy because you could just mess up your plants. Now, another thing I wanted to mention about manures is that the NPK is going to be different depending on like what the animal was eating, how old the manure is, the climate where it's been, composted or dried at. So all of these things are factors. These NPK ratios that I gave you, they're just a ballpark average. Well, buddy, that's it. That's all I have to tell you about manures as a soil amendment. Next week, we'll stay on the topic of soil amendments. We'll cover like kelp and things like that, see how that can help your plants in your garden. Don't forget, if you have a question or a comment about this episode, you can send me an email. That is inmygrow@gmail.com, or you can find me on all of the social media. Well, you can find me on most of the social media platforms. That is at InMyGrowShow. Now, don't forget, if this show has given you value, has educated you, entertained you, or even given you just a little escape from your day from all the worries of everything else going on out there, do me a favor, go over to patreon.com/inmygrow and leave a financial donation. Or you can go over to inmygrow.com, click on the Support the Show tab, and buy a t-shirt. You can also click on the Amazon link at the top of the show notes in this episode before you go shopping on Amazon, because that just lets them know that we sent you and the show gets a commission and it doesn't cost you anything. And those funds just make it easier for me to put the show on, to keep it going. It helps me pay for different hosting fees. It helps me pay for equipment. And all dollar amounts are appreciated. $1, $5, $1 million. Doesn't matter how much you give. I appreciate it all. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. I get it. Here's how you can help. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and leave a review. Subscribe to the website, inmygrow.com. And then go over to YouTube, search for In My Grow Show with Alex, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then after you do all that subscribing, just tell 3 other people about the show. That's it. That's all you got to do. Now, if you are a cannabis business or brand and want to advertise to our worldwide audience, just let them know you're still in business, let them know what you're doing. Send me an email, that is inmygrow@gmail.com, and we'll find the best way to do that for you. Now, as always, I want to thank all of the artists who let me use their music to put this show together. Well, mis hermanos, brothers and sisters, like I said, that's all I've got to share with you today. I love you all very much. Do me a favor, keep in touch with everybody. Call somebody, text them, just let them know you're thinking about them in this time of quarantine. If you need to get a hold of the show, if you want to talk to the show, leave a message, leave an idea for a podcast episode. Give us a call. That is 805-633-0639. All right, buddy, I'm going to get on out of here. I love you very much. And remember to always grow, learn, and teach.